Hey guys, welcome to She Knows Arsenal. This is your second stream of the day. Let's go. Let's get it going. Make sure you guys are liking this video and subscribing to the channel, because on today's show, we're going to be talking about whether or not Arsenal are suffering from poor summer signings and a little bit about Arsenal's injury crisis as well, because there are some players that are dealing with some injuries, and I can't help but feel like some active rotation would have helped, some better squad management and things like that. So like I said, make sure you guys are in the chat and in the comments letting me know what you guys are thinking. Let me know what time it is where you guys are as well. We did this morning for the earlier show. You guys were watching on from like some crazy places. So let me know where you guys are all watching from and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if you guys were there, but I was just on Dan's show, and that was like an epic stream. It was a huge debate on there between like Northside and Babs and me and Igal. It was crazy. I loved it. It was exciting. So yeah, make sure you guys check that out afterwards. But how's everybody feeling? What's everybody thinking? On the earlier show, we did go more into depth of the actual transfers. Right now, I want to talk about kind of like the players that we already have, how they've been used, what the summer window has done to our season, things like that, because there are a lot of conversations going on social media about Rice hindering us, Havertz messing us up, like being a bad signing or being the reason why we are where we are. So I want to delve deeper into a little bit more of that, because for me, like, I do think there's some truth to the idea that maybe Arsenal didn't have the best summer window, and that some of those earlier concerns are starting to rear their ugly heads. And listen, we're in the January transfer window, and Arsenal fans feel like we need 3 or 4 players, when in reality, we'd be lucky if we scraped, one, player at that. So it's a really interesting conversation that we're going to have. It's probably not going to be the most fun, but I do find that these streams actually are some of the best. So like I said, make sure you guys are in the chat. I see what you guys are saying. Ross says big up. Chosen One says, what's up, Jess? Missed the morning show because I was sleeping. Well, that's exactly why I decided to do 2 streams a day, just in case you missed the earlier one. You can always rewatch it on playback. So yeah, but I'm happy that you guys are here. Dodd says, Nketiah has gone 10 games scoreless in the Premier League since his hat trick versus Sheffield United, yet Jesus gets dropped for him. I'm not surprised that Nketiah hasn't scored a goal since then, because that's usually what he does. He scores a couple of goals in bunches and then goes missing for a long period of time, because he's just an average striker. Like, he's just not that good. So I'm not really surprised at that at all. And at that, I think he hasn't scored a goal away from home in a year. So playing him away at Fulham for me was like very shocking. It's like he just doesn't score away from home. Mr. Happy says we need to start an Edu out movement. I definitely think there should be some questions asked around Edu. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but Nantes in League One want to terminate Marquinhos' loan. Tavares also might have his loan terminated as well at Nottingham Forest. Our loans are not going very well. The players that we're bringing in, even though we're loaning them out, are never going to make us any profit, because they're not good players, So it's Edu, and we need to start looking at some of the bigger problems, other than just like, oh my God, I don't like this player in Player FC. Like, I think the conversations that we have about like Partey versus Rice and Raya versus Ramsdale and all this kind of stuff are a little more micro, when in reality we have to look at the overall decisions that are being made and ask questions of them, because from not integrating academy players when we probably need some of them in the team to like give us a little bit of boost, to having the likes of El Neni and Cedric and Rob Holding in the team for years on end without doing anything about it, to bringing in Havertz when we probably needed something different than that. I think it was really obvious what we needed and we didn't get it. Like, there's so many different decisions being made just beyond, I don't really like so-and-so. Like, Rice doesn't pass as good as Partey. Like, those are very like surface conversations that we're having, if I'm honest. Let's see. Jay says, if Zinchenko is injured, we are in trouble. We're going to talk about that as well. Ross says, Partey, Cedric, Nketiah, ESR, Fabio Vieira, Kivior, and El Neni need to go in the summer. The Arsenal perspective says, good Edu question. Is he the best DOF we could attract and get? I said it for before when what was his name? Luis Campos or whatever, when he was available, I was like, we should definitely be looking at him before he went to PSG. And people are like, why would we want him? We have Edu. And I'm like, there's not a single experienced person in the house. I think one of the biggest problems that Arsenal have currently is that there's nobody experienced in the house. You have an inexperienced manager, inexperienced group of players, and an inexperienced DOF. And because they're doing an okay job or a good job and we're improving every year, I think we're accepting that that's like, this is normal. But just think if we had more experience in the house, how much better we could be. I don't think that I'm fully convinced on Edu. I think I was a little bit harsh on him in the beginning in terms of like overturning the squad. I think that's probably the best thing that he's done so far is being able to like, especially during COVID, like turn this squad over and get us like a young foundation of players. But that's not the only thing we need you to do. We need you to be able to sell players for a profit. I think you should be able to find opportunities that don't cost us so much. Like if Arteta really wanted the Havertz profile, did we have to spend 65 million for it? There are certain things that I do feel like are going down the cracks because we don't have experience in the house. And people need to be watched. Some of these like people that are running the club, they need somebody watching them, you know? Nico says should have got Michael Edwards as soon as he left Liverpool. I mean, there are so many. I think a lot of our contemporaries have very good DOFs, and I feel like that might be a reason why they'll close the gap on us pretty quickly, is because they have the experience and the know how to make the right decisions. How to get the profiles in without having to spend as much. Like I do feel like Edu and Arteta waste a lot of money. That's how I kind of feel like. I feel like they waste a lot. Dodd said there's links with Vlahovic again. No thanks. He's been very underwhelming for Juve since joining from Fiorentina and only hit double goals since once in 3 seasons. You guys know I'm not really interested in Vlahovic. Not very interested in Vlahovic. So let's go ahead and get into it because I have some notes here. But get into the chat and let me know what you guys are thinking. I know a lot of you guys are probably watching West Ham and Brighton. I am as well. In the back of my like right there is like the game. So if I'm looking over there, it's because I'm like, oh, what's going on over there? But Arsenal were really close to a title winning team last season, I believe. I think the team that we saw last season was very, very good. I thought we had like a really good defense, obviously with Saliba and Gabriel back there. Ben White was in really good form. Zinchenko was doing really well at the time. We had a very, very good midfield in Thomas Partey, Xhaka, and Odegaard. And we had a very exciting front three that scored 40 goals all on their own. So I do think we had a very good team that needed some pieces added onto it. And at the end of the season, I think a lot of us felt like the injuries that were sustained during the run-in and maybe some unfortunate performances that we've seen before maybe led us to believe that we need a big midfield signing, a defender and an attacker. That was the best way to like split things up. And because Xhaka ended up leaving, I think maybe like the attacker was like, okay, maybe not the attacker, but maybe the midfielder. But all in all, I think we felt like we needed, somebody to come in the defense like Timber that could cover those positions because, we had some players that went down during the run-in and that really kind of like that was fatal. And then the midfield was something that we needed to look at because of Granit Xhaka, whatever. So, and an attacker just to like add things, right? But since the summer, we have been talking about the January transfer window since the summer ended, because I think from the very beginning, a lot of people felt as though what we were watching was not good enough. What we were watching wasn't what we expected when we said we wanted to go to the next level after a title challenging season where we were scoring loads of goals. We looked really solid. We were really exciting. We were playing good football. It was just at the end of the season where we tailed off a little bit, so we wanted to add to that. But what we were seeing wasn't really giving that impression. I think the Havertz signing in particular was the one that really put people's alarm bells up, because that is not a player that anybody would have expected to come to Arsenal after the season that we had. You guys know how I feel about capitalizing on the moment. I think when you're the most exciting young project, just barely missing out on the title, you have to use that to kind of get in front of the queue of other teams that are not as good in the moment. And I think we probably could have signed almost anybody at that moment, and we decided to sign somebody that we probably didn't need to. We probably could have went to everybody bar Barella and Frankie de Jong and gotten them, right? And we didn't use that opportunity well, in my opinion. But there's been a lot of conversation about where did the summer window go wrong. And I think when you are in October talking about the January transfer window and you get to the window and you know you need a defender, but you also feel like you need an attacker and a midfielder, and basically you need to redo the window again, your summer window was not that good. It wasn't good enough. It really wasn't. And so that's what I want to talk to you guys today about, some of the where we are now 5 months later and what can be done to rectify it. And is it just as simple as Mikel Arteta getting more out of the group that he has, or do we need to look at recruitment and things like that? Because I don't think he's getting as much as he can, but I also think we have some really big holes in the squad that cannot be fixed by Arteta just doing a little bit better, if that makes sense. So let's look at Declan Rice, because Declan Rice has been spoken about a lot over the last 24 hours. And I think, I'll be honest with you guys, like, I have a really good temperature on the fan base and like where certain narratives come from. And I think a lot of, like, there was a turn or switch on the fan base on Rice when we lost to West Ham, because his performance was not great. It was against his ex team and he gave away that penalty. I did feel the temperature switch a little bit on Declan Rice. And so if he didn't immediately have a great game against Fulham, I kind of had a feeling that, like, the questions would be asked about the signing, because there were already people that under the surface didn't want us to buy Declan Rice, because that meant that somebody else would end up not getting as much playing time, or their importance in the team would be minimized a little bit, right? And so Declan has come under quite a bit of scrutiny and criticism over the last couple of games, which I think is absolute nonsense, considering before the last two games, he was pretty much our best performer. He has the most man of the matches this season. And if it weren't for him, we would have lost to Manchester United or dropped points. We also would have lost to Chelsea. We wouldn't have got shit against Manchester City. We know that. And against Liverpool, he was also really good. So in the big games, he's come up big. Now, in the smaller games, I think that's where maybe people feel like he's left a lot to be desired, or a little bit to be desired, because his passing ability is not the same as Thomas Partey. But the idea that he's not a progressive passer is an absolute fallacy. And the numbers back it up, because he's our top three progressive passer with Zinchenko and Odegaard. That's also why Arteta probably dropped Odegaard a little bit deeper to add another progressive passer into the mix. The most times possession won by an outfield player in the Premier League in 2023, Declan Rice tops that list, right? So he's doing his job off the ball, and we know that he's fantastic at it. But no player in Europe's top 5 leagues has made more progressive passes this season than Declan Rice. So what we've gotten in Declan Rice is not only an upgrade off the ball from Thomas Partey, but he is a progressive passer. He's a really good progressive passer, and we've gotten the mentality and the availability. So for me to speak about Declan Rice in any capacity in a negative light, for me, is a little bit short-sighted, and mostly based on the emotional side of, oh my God, he didn't step up against his ex-team and my West Ham mates are bantering us. Fucking stop the nonsense. Declan Rice is probably he's the least of our worries right now. He's a fantastic player and has been an immense signing for us. It's unfortunate that he hasn't had the midfield balance that he probably deserves. But despite that, he's basically been carrying us through Odegaard going through some form issues and Havertz really trying to bet in. He's really done a good job, I think, in my opinion. And you guys can let me know in the chat what you think. But Rice, how do I say this? There's still a lot of confusion around whether or not Rice was meant to be the Xhaka replacement or the Thomas Partey replacement. My flag is firmly in the sand on he was the Thomas Partey replacement. I cannot get away from the fact that if Arteta wanted to build a new midfield, he would not have put Thomas Partey at right back at the beginning of the season. He didn't have to. It was not a necessity. As much as people are trying to tell me it's because he wanted to have the same, dynamics of having Timber inverted. Stop the nonsense. He could have easily played Tomiyasu off of the left, or he could have easily played Timber off of the left and Ben White and kept the defense the same, the way it has been, without having to, he didn't have to do that. I really do feel like Rice was brought in to play the 6 and Kai Havertz was brought in to play the 8. But he just has not had the ability to play with a really balanced midfield, or a midfield where everybody's firing and now everybody's looking at him. But listen, he's a fantastic signing. I think the one that needs to be looked at is Havertz more than anything. And there's an account that I follow that's really, really good at breaking things down tactically. And I don't have the tactical mind. I can tell you a little bit about it, but your girl is just not really like, I cannot explain it the way that he can explain it. And the account is HTOMUFC. I think he's a Man United fan, but never biased, always just gives the tactical bit, you know? And he was basically saying that, seen a lot of Arsenal's progression in possession and Declan Rice being the main brunt of it. And whilst I think the angle sometimes let him down in deeper phases, he is nowhere near a problem on the ball for Arsenal. However, I do believe that left center mid is a problem. So what I will admit is that I do think that Arsenal fans have a point in saying that maybe Declan Rice doesn't up the tempo quickly enough. Maybe he does opt for the safer pass sometimes. But the idea that he does not pass forward is a complete and utter lie. And so people need to let that go. What you probably want to say is that you wish he'd be more adventurous with his passing more often, because there are enough examples out there. And somebody retweeted the comp a couple of hours ago that there are plenty of examples of Declan Rice playing more risky passes forward to the likes of Odegaard and Gabriel Jesus. So it's not like he cannot do it. It's sometimes he does not do it. We don't know if it's instruction or because he just doesn't see the pass or whatever. But in reality, Declan Rice is one of our most progressive players, and he's not our main problem in terms of progressing through the thirds. He's nowhere near it. But the left center mid ends up being something that we talk about, which is the Havertz position. He also says that Havertz has been used interestingly, and whilst he's had a few good performances in this role, his inability to turn, progress, and be a genuine asset and build up is harming them. And whilst I quite like the use of his physical frame and build to play off of and use him for a long ball, I do believe long-term Arsenal need to evolve that position some way or another. And he goes on to say Arsenal have to adapt and fix the left center mid position going forward. Do you get a winter transfer, Jorginho as the pivot with Rice, or include ESR, dabble in the academy? It's a messy situation, and that's for sure. And that's absolutely what it is. It's a freaking mess. It's a mess. It really is. The left center mid is not something that I think has been it just doesn't make sense, to bring in Havertz and to play him in this position, because although I do understand maybe what Arteta was trying to do, he was going to play Havertz in that role, and then Timber was going to invert, and then all these things were going to happen. You cannot base your entire system off of one player being available, because when you do that, that player ends up not being available, and you're left with the mess that we have. Havertz cannot play without somebody like Zinchenko behind him, because you lose all of your progressive passing. Declan Rice cannot be the only progressive passer in midfield. That's why Odegaard has to drop deeper. And it works sometimes, but you still have to have a couple. Last season, we always had 3 progressive passers on the pitch: Zinchenko, Xhaka, and Thomas Partey. In some games this season, we've only had Declan Rice. That's not enough. You need to have multiple players that can break lines and can get the ball going forward at a certain rate. Against Fulham, we had 1 progressive passer, and that was Declan Rice, unless Odegaard dropped deeper. And so we're finding that there's a problem with Havertz, because when you pay 65 million for a player and he's on 200 and something thousand pounds per week, that player almost needs to be an all action, all weather player, somebody that you can see playing no matter what. When you have players that are more versatile and you can switch them out for other players, they tend not to be as important to your team, and they tend to not cost as much as Havertz has costed. But when you spend that amount of money and you tribute that much resources to that player, I would imagine that player is supposed to be a starter and is going to play most games and is going to be an all-weather player that you expect to play most games. If they are not, and the idea was for Thomas Partey and Rice to play together, then we should have never spent 65 million on Havertz, because that is starting, all action, all weather, available type player money attributed to a signing, And so the math ain't mathin' for me. If you thought Havertz was going to be a player that was going to play all the time, then you had to have accounted for the idea that if Timber wasn't there, then you knew you were beholden to Zinchenko, who's not is also injury prone, right? And so the Havertz signing is very, very strange and sticks out to me as the one that we're probably suffering for the most, despite him playing a couple of good games, like the guy said. And I think a lot of us believe that he has played really good games. I don't think that Havertz has been our worst. In fact, in some of our games recently, he's been our best player or the most, the one that comes up with the GA. But on a regular basis, when you have your fullbacks rotating because your fullbacks are unreliable, if he can only really be useful when Zinchenko is out there, then you have a problem because Zinchenko is somebody that we're trying to move away from. And he also, is injury prone himself. So I look at that signing as something that is really hampering us at the moment. And I don't know how you fix it because, again, you spent so much money on him, you have to make it work. And if the idea was to play him up top all along, which was people were saying, they were like, he was always meant to be the number 9. Why wouldn't you spend that on a real striker? Why wouldn't you spend that on somebody that really puts balls in the back of the net? That's why the idea that Havertz was always going to come in to be a bench player doesn't make sense, because the money that you attribute and assign to certain resources give you a good indication of how important that player is going to be to your team. And the way that they spent money on Havertz makes me think that he was always going to play that left 8, but it was always built on the fact that we're going to invert from a certain position. And that has just crashed and burned because, you couldn't write it. Timber, ACL, now Zinchenko out. What are you going to do? Let's see what you guys are saying. Social Join says Havertz ain't the reason Saka kicks the ball over. Let's not blame Kai now. I don't think I'm blaming Kai Havertz now. We're having a macro conversation about why Arsenal don't look as good as they did last season. You can cherry pick the games where maybe our finishers haven't finished, right? But you can also say that because we signed Havertz, that money could have been used for an attacker that's more clinical, and then we wouldn't be relying upon the likes of Saka and Jesus to be our most clinical forwards. All roads to me lead back to how we've assigned the resources. So even if it's not about Havertz being the one who misses the chance, the signing of Havertz takes away the opportunity to bring in a more clinical forward. And a lot of people felt like that's what we needed, was somebody that was more clinical and could put the chances away. So that's not the conversation that we're really having. I think the conversation that we're having is a bigger one. A conversation is more about, did we get the most bang for our buck for 200 million spent or 200 million spent? And right now, if you've spent 200 million, you probably don't feel as though we've spent it properly if we're already in the January transfer window and we feel like we need 4 or 5 players, right? And I'm talking about the overall feeling as well, is that despite us missing the chances against Aston Villa, missing the chances against West Ham, the overall feeling of the season is that we're not as good as we were last season, right? And I think that does have something to do with the lack of balance in midfield, which for the majority of the season, we haven't felt like is right, despite Havertz having good games here and there. So that's really what we're talking about. The Arsenal perspective says, not that it is hugely demonstrative, it is telling that our song for Kai makes a reference to 60 million down the drain. I know it's tongue in cheek, but for some, it's nonetheless telling. I hear you on that. Johnny D says, well, for me, Havertz is horrible, worst Arsenal blunder, but the rest of the team is pretty much like last season, and they are shit. That is not Arteta. Saka missing open goal. Fulham is for him. I feel like they're not shit. I think that's way overblown. I don't think the team this season has been shit. I think when you're sitting where you're sitting, like, quite frankly, if we had beat Fulham, we wouldn't be having these conversations because we would be like, 1 point behind Liverpool. These conversations are really coming off of the back of the 2 losses. And so, I think the big swing from these players are great to these players are shit, for me, is just too big. It's not really that the players are bad. They're really not. They're going through a bad period, and I'm really against calling the players shit when they're not. And yeah, there's games where it's some of our players are missing sitters. They are. I think Martinelli has been painfully out of form, and I think also Saka hasn't been at his best, and Odegaard hasn't been at his best, and Jesus hasn't been at his best, and all this kind of stuff. But overall, we're having a macro conversation about the signings. And so as much as people want to go into the weeds about our current players, for me, our current players need more support. are the players that we had last season. They needed players that were going to help them get it over the line. And I don't think that the players that we bought necessarily are giving them the platform to be better than they were last season. It's actually making it more difficult on them to do what they need to do. Right. And so, yeah, I hear what you guys are saying about, well, it's not Havertz's fault that Saka is missing wide open goals. But the way that we built the squad also means that Arteta doesn't trust Reece Nelson. And Reece, like, because Reece Nelson is not getting playing time and Trossard is also not trusted on the right, that Saka's playing until his Achilles falls off. And those are decisions. We could have signed a right winger to keep Saka fresh. Saka's literally playing with half an Achilles right now. And I don't know if you guys have ever hurt your Achilles before, but if that shit is hurting, you can't kick a ball. You can't kick a ball. So again, it all goes back to how we use the resources, how we built the squad, and whether or not that was we made the right decisions in order to get the team closer to winning a title, or if we unraveled it and regressed. All roads lead back to that for me. They all do, because it's not just that we went into the West Ham game and we missed sitters in Aston Villa. We've been actively speaking about since the beginning of the season whether or not this team is better, right? And I think a lot of the decisions that we made can be looked at and said, did that help us or did that hinder us? That's all I'm saying. Chosen One says, even with signings, I think the system needs a tactical change. No freedom or spontaneity, very stale and stagnant in the attack, no fluidity. Just look at LFC yesterday, lethal. That I definitely think we need to talk about that too. I definitely think we need to talk about that as well, because again, like the rigidity that's in the front line and the attacking positions. Remember when we played against Sheffield and I was bitching and everybody was like, why are you bitching? We won 5-0. I bitched because I was like, we actively create chances for our less optimal, like it was Rice and Zinchenko and these guys were getting on the ends of crosses and wasn't like our better players. Martinelli and Saka were creating for players that don't score goals. And our eights were not involved in creation. That's what I've seen a lot of this season is the eights are not creating and the back line and our DMs are the ones that are being meant to be the creative players. And also our wingers are creating for players that are less clinical than them. And so the dynamics have changed. And I think that also has to do with the players that we bought. Because Arteta wanted Havertz to be this box crasher, we have a player in our team that doesn't help with any buildup, is not really a good passer, but we're meant to be feeding him with chances. When I kind of rather our forwards be the players that are getting on the end of these crosses. I want Martinelli creating for Saka and Saka creating for Martinelli and Odegaard creating for the two of them. I don't necessarily want Saka and Martinelli to be creating for Odegaard and Kai Havertz and Rice. I don't necessarily want that. I don't even really want them creating for Jesus. I'd rather Jesus create for them. So then dynamics have really changed as well. And I think that's based on the players that we bought. And it's one of those where I think you have to really look at the decisions that have been made and look at it deeper than just, oh my God, they missed the chances against West Ham. This is a bigger issue that we have. Monk says, I think Timber drives the ball forward more than Zinni. Maybe that would have given Havertz more chances to make the runs and the opportunities for cutbacks. I do think a lot of what Arteta was trying to do was about Timber, but equally, you can't have a system based on the individual attributes of certain players. And I think that's been a growing theme with Arsenal is that our system is really based on Jesus and Zinchenko being there. And maybe that would have ended up being Timber as well. But when they're not there, the system is broken. And that's not the way a system should be built. We should be able to look like ourselves whether certain players are there or not. Maybe the level drops a little bit, but it is concerning to me that if one or two players are not there, that we literally can't kick a ball to each other. I don't think that that's normal. I really, really don't. And so if the entire summer window was built around Timber inverting, and Timber, it's not really about Timber's defensive qualities or anything like that. It's more about what he was going to do on the ball and how he was going to be super important. I'd rather our most important player be somebody further up the pitch. Somebody like I could understand Manchester City not looking as good as they could possibly look without Kevin De Bruyne, but that doesn't mean that the whole system falls apart. But it makes more sense for Kevin De Bruyne to be the player that you're building your system around rather than Urian Timber or Alexander Zinchenko, you know? And so, yeah, Timber was really important. I could see that. I can see that with my own two eyes that Timber was going to be important because then you don't have Zinchenko out there, but you have the invert and it's a different type of inverting. It's not as extreme and all that kind of stuff. And then it allows Havertz to push forward and things like that. But sometimes you might want to go back to basics. We have a lot of players where what they're good at is not based around the position that they play. And it's all about players being kind of like out of position. Our midfield strength is not built around the midfield. It should be like the three players in midfield should be the most active, most touches, most progressive, most creative. And we're not getting that from them. We're getting a lot of our progression from our left back. And also our number 9 has to drop in to do a lot of creative stuff as well. I think that when you're not playing at your best, those things start to look a little bit suspect, right? And so, yeah, I think Arteta may have went a little bit too galaxy brain and thought that the Havertz signing was going to do something, but that's a lot of resources attributed to somebody that's neither attacker or midfielder, right? Social Join says we're going to struggle to score until we get a direct striker, and more of our players are going to be deep in opposition half, only to get countered. Artie says, I want to see attacking players getting some freedom in opposition box with no fear to lose the ball or risk a pass. We tend to get the ball back quickly. I want to say this too about, I think this is a really good point by Artie as well. When you add Rice to the system, I think what you're adding is that was a 0-0. I would have never imagined those two would have nullified each other. But I think that when you buy Declan Rice, you're buying an insurance policy. You're buying somebody that's a superior off the ball player to Thomas Partey. Don't argue with me about it. Don't piss me off, you guys. Rice is superior to Thomas Partey off the ball. Not talking about on the ball, off the ball, he's superior to him. So what you're adding is somebody that's going to allow you, I would imagine, to be more adventurous because you have more of an insurance policy. Last season, it was more Gabriel and Saliba doing all of that saving us shit. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But with Rice, you have an additional player that's going to save us. But it almost feels like with Rice, we've actually even doubled down further and we're less adventurous than we were last season. And I feel like the attacking players do need a little bit of freedom. I do think that some of it is on their own and some of it is instruction. Like I think Arteta is telling them to be a little bit less, desperate to make the pass because we don't want to lose it and be stuck on transition and things like that. But I also feel like on their own, they can make better decisions. But we definitely need to let go of the handbrake a little bit more because you don't add one of the best off the ball DMs, if not the best off the ball DM, the best player that's going to save your bacon, only to become more scared to attack. Because last season we were probably too excited to attack, if we're honest. Sometimes we gave the ball away in silly areas and we got done on the counter. There were many times where I saw players running right past our midfield and when they were breathing down Saliba and Gabriel's neck. And if it wasn't for Ramsdale saving us or the two of them saving us, we were cooked. I've seen that many times, right? But you have to put the opposition on some sort of threat. They have to feel like you're going to throw additional resources forward and switch positions and be creative and batter them a little bit. And that stops them from trying to attack us as well. So I do think that it's strange that we've doubled down defensively and gotten so kind of strict on what we do on the ball, considering that we have a better insurance policy. And so that's definitely something that Arteta needs to look at because being more controlled helped us until the defense had their little blip. Our defense hasn't been as good as they had been prior to Liverpool. But the problem is that the attack has never saved the defense. The defense has been saving the attack. And so I don't really understand why we're so desperate not to concede, when you have Declan Rice in the team. And these players are not bad attacking players. I maintain this from the very beginning. I think the strength of our attacking players is the fact that they can all score and they can all create, and that when they switch positions and they're fluid, they're the best in the league. But, not best, but they're one of the best in the league. But when they're not switching positions and they're not being creative, they're not good. No, they're not as good. So it's interesting to me that we've gotten more strict with a bigger insurance policy. And I feel like it should be a little bit of the opposite of that. I understand the controlling aspect of things, but I do feel like we need to let the handbrake go. And I do think the players might be getting a little bit frustrated. I don't know if you guys have noticed that, but I feel like the players are a little bit, what's the word? I may be reading the tea leaves and being a little bit, I may be projecting a little bit. You guys can tell me if I'm projecting. But look at somebody like Martinelli, who I don't think he was shading Arteta I don't think he was shading him or being like, fuck you, Arteta. But he did make that comment about how they play with Brazil and how they allow the players to get closer together so that they can create openings, and how that suits his game really well. And he really likes that. Ever since he's pretty much made that comment, Martinelli's been shite since then. I'm sorry. Like, he really has been. But I also think like he could just be saying that, like, I need more freedom. I need to get closer. I need to be closer to the players around me, in order to make shit happen. And Martinelli looks frustrated. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but when he got taken off against Fulham, Emile Smith Rowe put his hand out and he didn't give him a high five. Now, I don't think that that's like the end of the world. It's bad vibes, but it's not the end of the world, right? Like, you're frustrated. Sometimes you do things that you probably at the end of the day will say, you know what, man, like, I didn't mean that shit. But Martinelli's frustrated. Do you maybe think that the players are a little bit frustrated playing this way? They were having the time of their lives last season. Even when we were shitty last season, towards the end, we were definitely still scoring goals. We were still exciting. We were giving up goals, but we were exciting. Attacking creative players want to have fun, and I don't think they're having fun. In fact, I don't think anybody's having fun playing this way. We're a little bit too scared to have fun. The best game that we played was probably against Lens. We had, we played okay against Brighton and Wolves, but the difference in those games than some of our other games is that we were willing to attack. And in some of our games, it felt like we were a little bit scared. And that's just where I'm at with it. Arteta, this January break couldn't have come any sooner, because I do think he needs to get fucking real about, okay, so for the first half of the season, being really, really controlled hasn't really paid off dividends that we want it to. So maybe I need to release the handbrake even by 5%, give them just 5% more freedom, and see if you can get the likes of Martinelli and Saka and Jesus going a little bit more, having a little bit more fun, because you need to make it fun. And I don't think they're having fucking fun. You know what I mean? I think they're struggling a little bit. But I still think they need to take some responsibility for missing wide open chances. I'm not saying that they don't have to, but when you're having fun, you tend to play better. I feel like there's an era of frustration with the players. It feels like it. I could be projecting, but that's what it feels like. Boy says Martinelli was taken off instead of Nketiah. That alone is a sackable, if you ask me. Diehard Gunner says, guys, the coach needs to look at himself. We have no bench. Our team is riddled with injuries. Who is that on? We'll talk about the bench too, because again, you guys know how I feel. I don't agree that we have nobody on our bench. I think Arteta refuses to use the players on the bench, does not put his arm around them, doesn't give them any confidence. And so we believe that these players are useless to us, but they are not useless. Emile Smith Rowe, Trossard, Nelson, Kivior, Fabio Vieira are not useless. But right now they're useless to us, and that to me is on the management. So, like I said, when you go back to the summer window and how we decided to bring on Havertz, we could have spent the money on an attacker and just used Vieira and ESR and these guys and spent the money somewhere else. Or we could have split it into two players. There were many players available. Kudus was available for 40 million. Nunez was available for 50 million. Nico Williams has a 50 million pound release clause. Bakayoko actually almost went to Nottingham Forest for 40 million. And Yusuf Fofana almost went to Nottingham Forest as well for 35 million. So you cannot say that we could not have addressed those positions with that 75 million a little bit different, or sorry, the 65 million a little bit different, especially with the wages attached to it. But you can't go back but it'll always stand out to me as one of the more curious signings that we've made. And it could go down as one of probably Arteta's worst signing, just because of the timing, the importance of the summer window, and the profile of the player, and also the temperament of the player. I do have an issue with Arsenal bringing in a player of such a shy. When you get rid of Xhaka and you bring in somebody to replace him, that's the complete opposite of him, temperament, leadership, and all that wise. I do find that very speculative. I think we needed more leadership and more personality, and we basically swapped out Xhaka for Rice and didn't add anything extra. But oh, by the way, we added somebody that needed a lot of therapy and love and care, when this team at the beginning of the season needed to be focusing in on winning and winning titles and making sure that they are better than they were last season. There was a lot of time spent on trying to nurture Kai Havertz into a player that was usable for us, and I found that that was an odd use of resources. Now, another signing that we have to talk about is the Raya signing, because I do think that this is one that will also go down as a strange one, just because of the prioritization of the goalkeeper when it probably wasn't high on anybody's list. I don't think it was high on anybody's list. It was definitely on my list, but it wasn't anything that I felt like had to get done this summer. I was excited when I saw that we were linked with Raya, because I was thinking to myself, we could improve our goalkeeper situation. Not a big deal. And at the time, Timber wasn't injured yet. Timber wasn't injured yet. So it was like, okay, we have Timber, we have Rice. We'll see what happens with Havertz, but we're also going to bring in a goalkeeper. That's fine. But in terms of, this is what David Ornstein said, and I find this to be why getting somebody in January is going to be next to impossible, is because before we can spend the 30 million that we spent on Raya, or that needs to be given to Brentford to become an obligation, whatever, that has to be made first. So, we need to kind of like make 30 million first, and then the money after that can be used to something else. So we put ourselves in a situation where, you kind of have to pay something else off before you can even start paying anything else, right? And that's not a good situation to be in. Arsenal are literally in a situation where they cannot spend any money until we sell, and sell quite a bit, right? Because the sales that were supposed to come in over the summer did not come in, which also goes back to Edu. You have to start selling, buddy. You cannot just go through many, many windows without selling anybody for a profit. Arsenal fans are very open to allowing like the narrative go by that our players are just shit, so you can't get money for them. But that doesn't really make sense, because I see our rivals getting money for their players, and those players are not good either. So the idea that we should have only been, I think we only sold like 72 million pounds worth of players, maybe, and that's nowhere near enough considering the amount of players that we had that we could have sold. We could have sold Emile Smith-Rowe. You could have sold Nketiah. You didn't do it. You could have also, if you knew you're going to bring in Raya, you could have sold Ramsdale as well, because having him around made everything very strange. The way that this was handled, to me, was worse than the deed. The messiness and the clumsiness of it. If you don't change the goalkeepers, you can use 30 million committed to do something else. But Arsenal are also unwilling to part with Ramsdale, which I find to be very strange, because he could fetch a decent fee, and him being in the team still added a level of clownery that was not necessary for Arsenal at the beginning of the season. Ramsdale, for me, was not good enough, like, to win us anything. He's culpable in his own demise at Arsenal as well. He stood out to me in the run-in, but he was nowhere near the priority. Raya was the number 4 best goalkeeper last season. Everyone rated him except for revisionist historians, but he hasn't showed the level required. And so the fact that he hasn't shown a sizable improvement, I think, to the level that Arsenal fans expect or want, especially because of him replacing a favorite, that will always look very strange. Not as strange as Havertz to me, but definitely strange that you chose to prioritize moving on a goalkeeper, but you didn't quite move him on. You didn't have enough balls to move him on and do it quickly and move him on. You know what I mean? Should have just moved him on, Ramsdale, to alleviate the drama, but you kept him around, put on a ruse of it's going to be 2 goalkeepers fighting against each other. But now we're in the January window and you still don't want to sell Ramsdale? It's nonsense to me. Always will look at that as like a very strange decision on how it was handled, and how it became a priority so quickly will always look strange to me. Another decision that is just like, who is running the ship out here? If we were going to bring in Raya, they should have had a way to move Ramsdale on quickly. No club would have done what we did. No club would have done what we did. It's too messy. It was too gross. Like it just added a level of, we already had the Havertz bullshit going on, but to add the goalkeeper uncertainty and bullshit again with a team that only needs to be focusing on winning the league was a total ridiculous move. Like it just made no sense, it really didn't. Just if you're willing to make the tough decision to replace Ramsdale in the first place, then you have to have the balls to sell him as well. And you didn't go the full way. You went halfway, almost like you wanted to. I want to make the big decision to bring in Raya, but I also want to make sure that I still have Ramsdale around just in case it doesn't work out. No, you have to make the big decision all the way around for me. Period. Period. Latte, thank you so much for your super chat. Says, hi, Jess. If the plan is win the league, we won't with Jesus, Eddie, Kai, and wasteful Arteta with the money and his one-way tactics. The league has caught up. I think you can have like Jesus. I'm never gonna say that you can't be your only goal outlet, and we should not be providing chances for him. He should be helping us. Like one thing I've noticed about Jesus this season is he's not dropping as deep and getting into creative positions in wide positions to help create for Martinelli and Saka. He's no longer doing that shit anymore. So he's not getting any assists. He's not really doing the things that a false nine of his level needs to be doing. He is sitting in a striker's position. And him in a striker's position is not going to do anything for us. We need him popping off and going over next to Martinelli and creating those triangles and dropping deeper and dragging the center backs out and creating the space for Martinelli and Saka to run into space. Not doing any of those things anymore. So in the way that Jesus is being used now, he's not enough. But in the way that he was used last season, I thought he was really good. And so I'm obviously want a striker in, but I think I want to separate Jesus from this just a little bit because I think Kai and Eddie are the ones that make less sense than him. But I hear what you're saying. The tactics definitely need to be more flexible. 100%. You cannot continue to play the same way and it not be working and not be willing to make changes. And when you have players in your squad that don't necessarily suit the starting 11 the way the starting 11 work, then when you bring them in, you need to use them in a way that suits them. I.e., stop playing Kiwior at left back. You're killing me and you're killing him. Sorry, but Kiwior played well at center back last season. Trossard played good last season. These players are not shit. Fabio Vieira is the number 10. He needs to play in a position that allows him to be mostly creative all the time. But no, we want to play him at left 8 where a lot of the things that he needs to do are off the ball. That's not going to fucking work. Like you need to start using what you have better. You know how it's like that thing where they're like, well, let me see what you do with what you got. And then we'll give you more money when you show that you can get a lot out of what you have. That's the kind of program that Arteta needs to be on right now because he's wasting a lot of money. A lot of money. These players don't have to be the end goal for you to get more out of them. Because I was looking at Liverpool's title winning team and there were some bums in there. There were some bums in there that you would say, listen, this player's not good enough to help us win the league. These players aren't good enough to help us win the league. I'll read you some of them out. Because I'm just like, hello, Nico Williams, one of them. They had Harvey Elliott in there, but he was just a kid. Curtis Jones at the time was probably not good enough because it was like, 2019? So he was a child. Divock Origi was in that team. Xherdan Shaqiri was in that team. Adam Lallana was in that team. Minamino was in that team. Oxlade-Chamberlain was in that team, right? Joe Gomez, I think he was a starter in that season, so he was definitely good enough. So I named about 5 players in there just on that because the rest of them are pretty much their starters that none of us would win on our bench. And if they were on our bench, we'd say, they're probably not the best. But you still got to get something out of them. Even though you know that these players aren't going to they're not your end goal. You still have to get more out of them than what you're getting. I don't think I would see Klopp putting Lovren at fucking left back. He's a center back. Play players in positions that suit them and you'll get more out of them and give them the confidence to step in if shit hits the fan. because when shit hits the fan, our players are never ready to step in. And even when they do, they're yanked out of the starting 11 as soon as they start showing some promise. I don't like that shit. I really don't. That pisses me off so much because we need to get more out of what we have because we're not Man City. We're not going to have this like never-ending money coming in. We can't just buy players for 50 million and just allow them to rot. We can't just buy Sambi and Fabio Vieira and Kivior and just say, you know what? They're just not good enough for me. Get out. Like, no, you have to do more with them, you know? And so thank you so much for your super chat. But I agree with you that Arteta's wasteful with money and his tactics definitely need to evolve, especially when it comes to using players that are on the outskirts of the squad and also like getting the most out of your star players. When I was on the stream earlier with Babs, one point that he made that was really, really good is that he doesn't feel like Arteta's treating our star players like star players. And I wasn't really thinking about that before, but it's true. You know, our best players should be put in the best positions to do well. And I feel like our best players maybe are being given the role of like the grunt work, while less good players are being given more cushy roles, right? And so everything can't be built around Havertz working. It just can't be. Havertz works, he doesn't, whatever. But you cannot focus on Havertz and then not look at what's happening in front. Havertz for me should not be the main goal scorer. So him getting into the best goal scoring positions for me is a nonsense. We need to get Martinelli in the best goal scoring positions. We need to get Saka in the best goal scoring positions. And we need Odegaard and Jesus creating for those two. Not Saka and Martinelli creating for Havertz and Rice and all these other guys coming and making these late runs, and they're not going to score. You know, they're not going to score. So I don't know. I feel as though that we need to do more with what we have and kind of give our best players the cushy roles. You know, in fact, you should probably put Martinelli in a role where he doesn't have to do anything but score goals at this stage if you want to get more out of him, because I think he's a good creator, but his main attribute, his main superpower is putting the ball in the back of the net. He makes good runs. He has a good nose for goal, and right now he doesn't look like he can hit a barn door. He looks so out of form. So put him in a position that's going to give him just the listen, this is all you have to do is score a goal. And really give everybody more simple roles. If you do that, maybe you'll get more out of your players. Mr. Happy says Edu is the wasteful one. I think they're both wasteful. Zig says our bench hasn't changed. Fans can predict who's coming on. That's a bad sign. No, our bench isn't exactly the same. It's not. Fundamentally, it's not exactly the same. There was a time where Tavares and Sambi were on our bench. They're not on our bench now. Trossard wasn't on our bench at the beginning of last season. He's on our bench now. Like, our bench has fundamentally changed. I think we're getting the same results out of our bench. So they're saying that the bench is the same, but it's not. It's no longer Elneny and Cedric and Rob Holding. It's like Tomiyasu and fucking Trossard and Emile Smith-Rowe. Like, and if everybody was fit, it'd be even better than that. So I'm not having this, the bench hasn't changed. It definitely has changed. What hasn't changed is we're not getting more out of our bench. You know, people need to start thinking like, is it actually the same? Or is it we're just getting the same results? We're getting the same results because Arteta's not using the bench properly. And it's not that I think that Fabio Vieira and Emile Smith-Rowe and these guys are world-class players that we have to hold on to. But he's not getting anything out of them, and that's unacceptable, especially for players that we paid money for and re-signed. Here to There says we certainly need a new transfer squad management process. There should be no debate in that regard. I agree. I think we've been talking about the same things for years, that the bench doesn't look good when they come off you don't get anything out of them. I watch other teams with less good players than we have on their bench get some change out of the players that are coming off of it. That's why I don't really buy into this idea that we just need to keep spending and bringing in better players, because I think if you're not getting anything out of what you have right now, then you don't deserve the opportunity to spend more money. You know, you had the opportunity to use Fabio Vieira and ESR in the midfield and bring in an attacker, but you decided to bring in Havertz. You spent 100 million on left center mid or the 8 positions in Havertz and Fabio Vieira, but you won't let Emile Smith-Rowe go and you don't play him. None of this makes sense to me. None of this makes sense to me. So you need to start using the squad better and stop bullshitting, you know? It's bullshit to me. So let's continue because I want to talk about some of the injuries that we have and give some updates on that because we have had some updates on the injuries. Thomas Partey has most likely sustained another setback because he's not going to AFCON, and he's been out since, how long has he been out? He's been out for a month now, maybe longer. Let's see. When's the last time Thomas Partey played for us? Was against Manchester City, right? So it's been a while. And it was like a muscle injury. It's always a muscle injury with him. Let's look. How far back was Manchester City? Because he didn't play after that, right? It was actually a little bit after that that he sustained that injury, I think. We played the Manchester City one is not here. It's stupid. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, we played Manchester City, and then he didn't make the bench against Chelsea, or he was on the bench and didn't come on. One of those two. Actually, let me click it and just get the right information here for you guys. No, he was on the bench. He was on the bench against Chelsea and did not come on. And then he didn't make the squad for Sevilla. And then after that, we didn't see him anymore. So let's just say the last time that we saw him was October 24th. It's fucking January 2nd. That's, if you'd give it grace and say that that was the end of October, November, December, he's been out for 2 months. And so he should have recovered from the injury that he had, but he hasn't recovered yet. And Chris Hughton, the Ghana coach, said Arsenal would treat his injury with caution. So will the player. This is a big injury for him, the biggest injury he's ever had. So if you think about this being the biggest injury he's ever had, and he's had multiple injuries at Arsenal, this isn't a good sign. From all the information we've been given, the timelines of his recovery and the caution that will be taken will not meet our timelines for AFCON. Now, this could be a little bit of Arsenal being like, listen, we need you badly at the end of the season, so you need to prioritize us over them. It could be a little bit of that. We know how Arsenal are. If we ask them not to go to international duty, then that means we have to kind of play the game and not play them. But we also maybe don't want him to risk himself, whatever. But it doesn't look good. Even Sammy McBell said that the information is not good. So maybe he has a setback, maybe not, but he's already been out for 2 months. Now, I still have people saying that a fully fit Thomas Partey in the second half of the season is going to be a major boost, and it would be. It would be, especially if everybody is bought into the idea that Thomas Partey and Declan Rice was always the plan. Whatever. But I just feel as though this is a never-ending thing with him. And he's such a good player, and he would give us such a boost, but like, I'm not going to hold my breath for him to be fit for the rest of the season. My hope is that he's prioritizing Arsenal for once and is staying back to make sure that he's fit for us after this January break. But if it's the case that he's had a setback, which nobody said he has, they're just assuming that he has, then fuck. No, because that's the whole, like, being out from basically August all the way until now, and then beyond that is wild. So you have to think that maybe after that winter break, when does AFCON end? Like, when's the final? Let's see. AFCON dates. Let's see. When is the final? Because I wonder if it coincides with AFCON dates. I'm just looking this up for you guys real quick. The final is on February 11th. Ghana were not making it to the final. I don't even watch African football like that, but I know that for sure. They weren't going to make it to the final. But Arsenal's next game in the Premier League is January 20th against Crystal Palace. I would imagine that because they're saying that Arsenal's timelines and all that kind of stuff don't coincide with AFCON, maybe Arsenal will keep him until after that, But he can't, like, if he's not back by February, guys, we're so fucked because then we would not have replaced him, But let's just hope for the best and that Arsenal are just keeping him back so that they can have him back soon for us. That's what I'm hoping, but it doesn't look good, you know. Um, White says, look at the table compared to last year. Every team except for Arsenal in the current top five are on the same level or has improved. The only team basically the same as City. Look at the table compared to last season. Every team except Arsenal in the current top five are on the same level or has improved. The only team that is basically the same as Man City. Let's see. Social Join says Partey is a myth. He ain't back till March, April, unicorn settings. I mean, listen, it's just the never-ending cycle of Thomas Partey, and no matter how much you guys tell me that he's so important and Rice can't do this and Rice can't do that and we need him, tell your boy to stay fit. Tell your boy to prioritize Arsenal and sit down and be ready for us. Tell your boy to be fit because it's not like Arteta's benching him. It's not like Rice is starting and Partey's on the bench. He's not even available. So this whole conversation about him being so important and like you're just disrespecting him so much. I'm like, I'm not disrespecting somebody who fundamentally is never available when we need him to be. We needed Tomiyasu and Thomas Partey for this difficult period, and we don't have them, And so I keep the same energy as well. You guys know I was on the show earlier saying that I felt differently about Tomiyasu's new contract now that he's been injured again, because everybody that's injury prone to me cannot be important to the team and needs to have like almost like a pathway out sooner rather than later. Because as an Arsenal fan, you should know that injury prone players do not come good. They don't. They're always injury prone. Ramsey, Diaby, Jack Wilshere, they're all the fucking same. We always think about what they could be. We romanticize the flashes that we've seen in between injuries, but in reality, when you've had 3 or 4 seasons of consistent injuries, that's who you are. Whether you're Thomas Partey or you're Ramsey or Diaby or Tom, that's who you are. You're injury prone and unreliable above all else, in my opinion, especially when you're getting paid £250,000 per week, And so it's not even personal, but he doesn't seem to be anywhere near coming back for us. And that's really unfortunate because we're not going to be able to get a midfielder in January. So what are we going to do? Jonathan says, just play him in the Champions League games, laugh out loud. Will he even be available for those? Like, if he's not available for February 21st when we play against Porto, I mean, like, what are we doing? We need Tomiyasu and him back by then because we cannot go out of the Champions League with a whimper. We're already, like, we really needed them now. We needed them for Anfield. We needed them for Villa. We needed them for this tough run. And then the FA Cup. We don't have them. And so February 21st is, like, for me, the deadline. Because if you don't go away to Portugal with us, I'm so mad. And that's Tomiyasu and Thomas Partey. Not one, but both, because both of them are giving the same energy. I'm there when it's fun and we have a bunch of players available, but I'm never there when I need you for real, when you need me for real, And that sucks. It really does. I saw Yo-Yo make a comment about Thomas Partey running his deal down or something like that. Yo-Yo says Partey is likely to run his contract down if he's now physically finished. Yeah, I don't really think that we're going to, if he goes beyond now, I don't think we'll sell him because I think he'll sit on that contract because he's never going to get that money again. And so, and you know what, that's for me, like, listen, speaking purely football wise, I'm not like, I thought the time to sell him was this past summer. I think once you got into the final year of his deal, you became, you're cooked. It's basically like having a crocodile in the water with you. You're done, because once a player gets into the final 12 months of their contract, you're finished. They're just going to sit on it, especially if you're getting £250,000 per week. You ain't going nowhere because you can go Saudi right after that. Why leave? Why leave? You're at Arsenal, you're in London, you're fine. You're being paid to do a lot of nothing, So I don't think that, I think beyond the January and the summer prior, like, we're not going to sell him. He'll probably run his deal down, which will make a lot of people happy because he's our best player and all this kind of stuff. But Arsenal still need to go into the window in the summer and really think long and fucking hard about their midfield, because what we have right now is just, Thomas Partey could take up the Jorginho role. Jorginho could leave. and then Thomas Partey can take up that Jorginho role. But bitch, you still need to go out there and get somebody, because let's be all the way freaking for real. A 32-year-old Thomas Partey ain't playing no important games for us. He's gonna fill in for the damn Cups. Okay. Latte says they're injury prone. Just expect the worst for Partey and Tommy. That's why I don't understand why people are like, well, they'll be so good for us when we get to the latter stages of Cups. What makes you think they're gonna be there? What makes you think? What makes you think he's gonna be there? D'Angelo says Tommy isn't so bad, but Partey is taking forever. To me, Tomiyasu is just as bad because he hasn't been here as long, but he's showing the same level of inconsistency in terms of his availability. Like and it's as good as he is, I don't think he's irreplaceable either. I think the thing about Thomas Partey that makes him more irreplaceable is the fact that he's a unicorn. The fact that he's the type of player that you cannot find on the market anywhere else. We know that once we fully move on from Thomas Partey, there's not going to be anybody with the same combination of skill sets. And I know that's why a lot of Arsenal fans are really afraid to part from him, because they want somebody just like him to come in. It's impossible. There's no other Thomas Partey, right? But Tomiyasu is replaceable. He is. I can name 3 or 4 players that I would take right now, and replace Tomiyasu with. Even though I love Tomiyasu and I'd love to keep him, I think that there are players out there that definitely could do a job for Arsenal and be better than him, if not just as good, if not better. So I don't think we should be beholden to these players for what? Like, what's the point? Like, Mr. Happy says name them. I would say one player that we should be looking at is Estupiñán. He's better than any of the left backs that we have. Like, he is exactly what Arsenal should be looking to bring in. When people talk about, I want an attacking fullback, I don't want an attacking fullback. I want somebody that does both parts of the job just as good. Estupiñán does the attacking parts of the game as well as the defensive parts of the game as good as anybody. He's definitely one that I would look at, I would look at that Inacio. I think he's looks pretty good. He's better on the ball than Tomiyasu. I know that for fucking sure. I would probably say Kato right now. Is he injury prone? No, so bring him in. There's Tomiyasu is not irreplaceable, you guys. Like, he's a good part of the squad, but let's be all the way freaking for real. Can Livramento play on both sides? He could do really well for us. That's all I'm saying. So, but yeah, Mr. Happy says you're naming 60 million players, Jess. Yeah, but you said just name players that I would take and replace Tommy with. I would do that because, listen, like, we need to. This is nonsense. Like, we have too many injury-prone players. Like, and idealistically, like, especially if Zinchenko is never going to play midfield, you also have to look at him too, because his succession plan cannot be to get older and still be playing left back. So you also have to look at that too. Boy says Tomiyasu is better than Zinchenko. Would sell Zinchenko over Tomiyasu, even if Tomiyasu is slightly more injury prone. So let's chat a little bit about Zinchenko too, who was basically replaced by Timber and Tomiyasu for the most part. He's basically our third choice left back. He's injury prone. He's missed 20 games since being at Arsenal. And since being at Arsenal, he suffered from the same calf issue that he's now has right at this moment. And he's missed 16 games from a calf issue. So just like Tomiyasu, they both have calf issues, which I don't know if you guys have ever ran before, but if that shit ain't working, you ain't running. Because if your calf clenches up on you, woo, buddy, I'm telling you, like, your Achilles, anything that needs to like flex a little bit for you to do something, like your Achilles, the way it like expands, and that's why I know Saka's in pain. Saka's in pain. He's doing a lot with a little. Because if your Achilles is gone, whew, it's bad, right? Now, your calf, I've had both of my calves clinch up like that at one time when I was running. I couldn't get up for 30 minutes. You guys, Zinchenko has a problem with his calves, right? And he's already missed, like, this is only his second season. So, sorry, missing 20 games is a lot already for somebody that's so important. And people are probably like, why he's so fucking important? He just is. His passes into the final third in 2022, 2023 last season were 8th in the league. He was 8th in the league for passes into the final third last season, and he's 6th this season. So his level in the Premier League for progressive passes has increased from last season to this season. And that's most likely because, one, he's still doing a lot of the work that he was doing last season, but he also has to take on a lot of the things that Xhaka was doing, because Xhaka was doing a lot of the progressive passes as well. Xhaka, so far in the at Bayern, or Bayer Leverkusen, has the most progressive passes, the third most passes into the final third, the most passes completed, the most carries, all of that in the Bundesliga. So you just thinking about that player missing for us. Zinchenko's having to take up more of that because Havertz doesn't do any of that. He does about like 10% of that, So Zinchenko is doing all of that and is doing more now this season. His progressive passes this season are 4th in the league. Progressive passes from our left back are 4th in the league. Think about that. 4th. And in Europe's top 5 leagues, he's 5th. This is Zinchenko. He should not, like, the fact that he is so important to our team, more so than last season because there's no Granit Xhaka. But the fact that he's so important to the team all speaks volumes of the way that system is built, because we cannot progress the ball without him. Timber was probably going to do a lot of that for us, but we literally cannot progress the ball to a high standard without him. That's a problem, because the dichotomy of Zinchenko is that even though he's doing all this heavy lifting for us in progressing, he's getting exposed in the back end more than he was the season prior. And so that is the Jekyll and Hyde of Zinchenko. He's too important. But in this season, because we have no Timber, him being injured right now is so bad. It's so bad. We lose all of our progression. Like I said, last season, we had 3 players that were like ball progression, like juggernauts. Xhaka, Zinchenko, Partey. All 3 of them were doing so much progression in our team. Without Zinchenko, you have 1 in Rice. And that also means that you have to drop Odegaard deeper, so you lose a little bit of something in attack as well. There's a lot of shit going on here, And again, what did we do in the summer? Why didn't we buy a midfielder that could do that job? Why did we buy another defender to do that job for us? I love Timber. He could still come in, but there probably needed to be a midfielder that could do that job for us, because without Xhaka and without Zinchenko, we're cooked in progression. So that's why when people talk about Zinchenko like a dog, I'm like, it's only going to take 1 game of us not having him in the team where you'll realize how bad this sounds. Because even if you don't like his politics and you don't like that he gets exposed defensively, we do not look the same in like our buildup or anything without him. So he should not be this important. It's a big flaw in Mikel Arteta's system that our left back is our most important player in terms of progressing the ball through the thirds. But I'm sorry, this calf injury that Zinchenko has is very costly for us, because you already don't have Tomiyasu to help us defensively. You don't have Timber. You don't have him. And so what we watched against Fulham is our reality, is Havertz dropping deep to try to get the ball in the center circle, and that's not where you want him. That's where he was getting the ball earlier on in the season, where we were like, why is he, like, he's involved, he's trying to get involved in buildup, but he's not fast enough or agile enough to move, because that's not what his game is built around. His game is built around movement and in the final third. So unless you drop Odegaard right into the double pivot, what are you going to do? And so, yeah, Zinchenko's injury is bad, but it's not like something that we couldn't anticipate, because he's injury prone. Zinchenko is injury prone, just like Tomiyasu. And we're very unlucky not to have Timber. But I also feel like that's karma a little bit, because we spent the money on Havertz, which for me is a very arrogant move when you know that you have 2 injury prone players behind Timber. You just lose everything in possession. You just do. As much as people hate Zinchenko, I'm so sorry to tell you guys, but we need him. We need him this season at the very least, because Timber, based on what I'm reading right now, Jurrien Timber is making progress, but he's penciled in to return in March. If he's penciled in to return in March, like just start running and training with the team. Then from now, January until probably April, when he'll be fit enough to play, we need Zinchenko, or they need to get their asses in the market and make something shake, because we cannot progress. But the fact that like we cannot progress the ball without our left back is a big flaw. And you could actually make the argument that it would be better suited for Arsenal to just go get a midfielder that could do that job for us, knowing that Timber's coming back, knowing that Zinchenko will probably come back at some point this season, right? And maybe take a punt on one of our academy kids, because not having a single midfielder that can do it on that left-hand side is very, very, very suspect. It's very unserious behavior, and only something that Arsenal would do. Only something that Arsenal would do. You know, you got to help Rice out a little bit. You got to allow Odegaard to play the position that he always played. He can play that deeper role because he's just that good. And him playing in that deeper role has helped us a lot because of the imbalance in midfield. But idealistically, you really want Odegaard higher up, don't you? You'd want him higher up, don't you? You know, because we already don't have that much creativity in the team anyway. You know, so we got a lot of shit going on. Off the Radar says he should not have benched Jesus for Fulham. I don't understand why he did that, because you lose everything with Zinchenko. You lose absolutely everything with Jesus, because as much as we don't like them right now, right? As long as Robbie Musto says Declan Rice is his player of the season, and of course he is. But as much as we probably feel like we want to move on from those two players, Arsenal just do not function without them at this current stage. So leaving him out makes no fucking sense. Putting Nketiah in, it was like very like basic math. Like, we're not scoring enough goals, so get in a true number 9 and we'll just score more goals. No, Nketiah does not equal more goals, baby. It does not. You lose so much. You lose so much without them. And like, basically who we are as a team is who we are against Brighton and who we are against West Ham. That's who we are. That is the scale that we're on. We're either the team against Brighton or we're the team against West Ham. We create a lot of chances with Zinchenko and Jesus in the team, but on some days we create enough chances and nick enough goals where we win, and our defense is good enough to sustain whatever Zinchenko's issues are. Or we're the team that loses against West Ham, who has so many chances but doesn't put them away and gets got a couple of times on transition. That is who we are in a nutshell, with our best team available, mostly, with Jesus and Zinchenko. It's still not good enough, because you don't have that inevitability that you need to win a title. But what we are without those two, we might not even be a Champions League team if we sure. You know, Temmie says, Jess, you are overstating Zinnia's importance. We did well without him when Tommy was benched. Benching him? Do you think so? You think? Okay. So what I'll say is that our best performances this season have come in the span of time. Actually, I'll go look at it, because even though Tomiyasu was playing well, that doesn't mean the team was playing well. Think about those two different statements. Tomiyasu was playing well, but had the team clicked yet? The team didn't click until after Lens, right? And so we played against Lens. We know that was the time where it shifted. Guess who started at left back in that game? Zinchenko. Playing against, let's see. Let's go. Actually, yeah, he did. No, he did start. Hold on. No, maybe he didn't. Hold on. Let me go a little bit further back. I want to make sure I'm getting this right. Yeah, he started. Okay, so Lens 6-0. Zinchenko started, right? Against Wolves, which was another good game for us. Guess who started? Zinchenko. Against Luton, guess who started? A game where we struggled a little bit. It was Kivior, but when we won the game, who came in and who was a big part of our progression? I'll give you a guess. It was Zinchenko. Aston Villa, a game where we probably should have won. Who started? Zinchenko. PSV, that was a throwaway game. We don't have to look at that. You guys are getting my point, right? is that all the games since we've clicked have included him at left back. So I'm not sure how I'm overstating his importance when the click, just because Tomiyasu was playing well doesn't mean the team was playing well. Even when we played against Brighton, like Zinchenko was in there. Zinchenko played that game. All of our best games this season included Zinchenko in them. Make it make sense, you guys. Like, just because you don't like him doesn't mean it's not obvious that he's super important to our team. And Tomiyasu did play some of those games at right back too. So yeah, he is freaking important to our team, whether you like him or not. Let's be serious. Let's be serious, you guys. Elliot Roberts says Zinni case in point. Last great match we played against Brighton. Zinni was a huge part of that match. I saw it in person. Zinni is integral to our attack. And that's, to me, why our system is flawed, is because we have somebody in our team that has obvious flaws that, like, and everybody has players in their team that have obvious flaws, but you can only really account for those when that player is like outstanding, like 99% of the time. Right now, we're getting games with Zinchenko where what he's doing on the ball is fantastic, but there's even some nicks in there. And then there's the defensive flaws too. So I think Arsenal should be able to take Zinchenko out and still be able to progress the ball and create loads of chances without him. But fundamentally, we cannot right now. And that's the biggest issue. Again, whether you like him or not, like I don't know what to tell you, you know? I don't know what to tell you. He's really important. Chosen One says, Jess, so you never want a player like Alex Balde, right? Seems like a superstar in the making in that position. Not sure about his defending, but he certainly has everything necessary in attack. Yeah, I mean, he looks like a really good player too. Like, I know a lot of people really like him. I just don't know if we can get anybody from Barcelona. Like, I'm just talking about players that I personally like. I like Estupiñán because I know that if you spend the 60 million, that guy's going to be able to defend and attack. He's a grown up. He's not getting knocked off the ball. I don't really want us to go into the same thing that we've been having where they're either really good at one thing or the other. Like, defensively, I think at this stage, like, you need to start looking at how imbalanced our fullbacks are. You either have players that are really good defensively or ones that are really good in possession, but none of them are really good at absolutely everything. Maybe Timber was going to be that, but I even think that Timber is not as good defensively as maybe we think he is. Do you know what I mean? And so, yeah, I'd prefer us get somebody that I know can fucking defend. That's it. Yo-Yo says we should stop inverting if Zinchenko isn't on the pitch and force fullbacks to provide the width instead. I like that idea. You guys, this heater is so damn hot. I'm dying. Woo! That heater, you guys see it? I was like sweating a little bit. Oh my God. I agree. I think just everything needs, like, we need to have more flexible tactics. Like, like we've been doing this for a while and it works, but when you have certain players out or players out of form, it doesn't work as well, and I think that's just like the most important thing, that we have a couple of players that are like all weather players that can play no matter no matter what's going on. Rice, Odegaard, Saliba, Gabriel, Saka, Martinelli, they're all weather players. Like, no matter what's going on, they'll probably be the right option no matter what. Then you have like Jesus, you have Zinchenko, you have some of our other fullbacks, and then you have like Kai. You have some players that are not all action, all weather players. And so they end up, when they're out of form or in certain circumstances, not looking like the best option. And that, to me, is a flaw in our system. Is too many of the system is based around individual characteristics. And I just don't understand why you would buy certain players that don't necessarily fit those characteristics and you expect them to do those things. It makes me really like annoyed, Aha says, Jess, why did we take Havertz off? Yeah, I know he wasn't doing anything really when we needed a goal, and then started whipping in more crosses in, and almost all of them are rubbish. I don't know, because I stopped watching at like the 60 something minute. Like, I don't know why. I'm so sorry, but I couldn't watch another minute of that shit. Like, basically, from the moment that they scored, I knew we were losing. Because you could just feel it. And so I stopped watching and started getting ready for the show because I knew I didn't miss anything. And so I don't know why Arteta took him out, but our tactics never really make sense. Like, we whip in crosses to Jesus, but when we have players that are more like, this is the thing, if you're going to play Havertz and you know that you don't have the inversion and you don't have Zinchenko to do the inverting, I would imagine that you'd decide to play more direct. You would bypass, you would stop, you would figure out a way to play against Fulham that didn't require you to pass through the thirds in these intricate little triangles. There were so many times where the team was getting the ball and they were trying to do these intricate little triangles, but they weren't going anywhere. And I just wonder, if you have somebody like Havertz on the pitch whose best quality is probably off the ball, why you're not hitting it long into the channels and letting him flick it on to other people, why you're not doing a little dice ball. I think our best chances would have been on the counter, like our goal came from, and going more direct. I've never seen our team this season try to be direct, except for like against Man City at the very end. I don't see us trying to hit them in behind. I don't see us trying to, like, sometimes it's just useful to kick it into the corners and run after it and try to make them make mistakes. That's what they do to us. And we guess what? We fucking make mistakes, So I don't know why we don't do it more. It just feels like it's one way or the highway, no matter who's out there. But Havertz is somebody that if he's on the pitch, you need to be whipping crosses in, and we just don't do it enough. We'll do it at the end when we're really trying to win, but let's be serious. Like, his best attributes are in and around the box. Hassan says, hi, why are people pointing to Rice's performance when he's been our best player all around? Because they're Thomas Partey FC and they just can't get over the fact that we need to move on from the guy. That's my piece on that. And so we're in a little bit of a pickle defensively. And I also want to state that, like, before, when I was on the other stream, I had mentioned that Ben White had a knock, and there's people actually out there that don't believe that Ben White has a knock. They think they're making him an excuse for his poor form. Now, my counter argument to that is, if that were the case, then why are we not using that same argument for Martinelli? I do think that genuinely Ben White has a knock, and as much as people just don't like Ben White and have never liked him since the beginning, when I'm telling you, there's some players that they have this one moment, this one turning point, especially if you didn't really want them to begin with. And once that moment happens, you're just done. And I just still think that some people do not rate Ben White because he got bopped, by fucking Tony in his first game. I just feel like sometimes you just have an uphill battle that you'll never win. But for me, the idea that the media is lying about Ben White having a knock feels very like a reach for me, and more based on the fact that I've slated him and I've talked about how bad he is, but I don't want to accept that he had injury. He just did. It's just like, it made sense right away once they said that Odegaard had the injury, and now that he doesn't have it, he's playing much better. And people are like, why is Ben White playing? I'm like, Ben White is playing because there's nobody else to play. We don't have anybody else to play. And you can say all you want that you want to play Cedric, but the moment Cedric makes a mistake, you guys are going to be cussing Arteta out for playing Cedric. So Ben White is playing because there's nobody else to play. But my only, devil's advocate to this is, Ben White has been injured for a while. Those rumors have been around for a while that he's carrying a knock. And because of Tomiyasu's injury, by the way, there's no way to rotate Ben White out. So as much as we want to hold certain players on a pedestal because they are not there, and the players that are there playing with injuries or they're not playing well, I think that's really disingenuous and really wrong. I think Ben White, if he is playing with an injury, I don't really want to sit around and say, well, Tomiyasu was so good, I miss Tomiyasu. It's like, yeah, I wish Tomiyasu was here as well, so Ben White didn't have to play with this injury. But that being said, Arteta did have an opportunity to try something different and to see if we had like somebody in the academy that could play that position, just in case, because we already knew that Ben White was dealing with something. He's been dealing with something for a while. He hasn't looked right for a while, and instead of using Rule Walters, he decided to play Cedric, a player that we know he's never going to use. And so this thing about, I'm going to use Ben White even though he's injured, and not even try to see if Rule Walters could do a job, for me is one of the things about Mikel Arteta that I just do not understand. That why don't you use all the resources available to you to the best of your ability? I do think there's managers that would get a lot more out of what he has. I think he has so much. Maybe he doesn't realize how much he has, but you have to dig into the academy every once in a while and see if you have somebody there that can fill in for a minute. I don't like the idea of Ben White playing when he's injured, especially in the state that he's in right now. He is in the state right now where he doesn't even look like he can run. And so I do think it's a bad look for Arteta to continue to play somebody that's injured. But when he had the opportunity to try a Rule Walters again, thing is worrying because again, we don't have anybody. No Zinchenko, no Tommy, no Timber. But this would be a good time to get maybe get Rule Walters into the warm weather training and see if he can do a job because Cedric's ass should be gone in a couple of days. I expect him to go. He's taking up big wages, and if we don't get rid of him now, he'll go on a free. And so get a nominal fee for Cedric and allow Rule Walters to go to warm weather training and see if he can't play against Crystal Palace. Because I'm so fucking sorry. I see many teams, no matter where they are, whether they're top of the league or fucking bottom, bringing in players from their academy and it doesn't torpedo their season. So I don't understand why Arteta acts like if a single academy player touches that pitch, that life will end. Please stop the nonsense. I can understand Saka a little bit more, but he has choices with Saka as well. Saka's playing with an Achilles injury. And again, if you've ever hurt your Achilles, you know that shit hurts. And so all the games that Saka played full 90s when he didn't have to are probably now coming back. And we're in a difficult period where we need him and he's not 100%. And so Saka still needs to do better in certain circumstances, but why can't Reece Nelson play the odd fucking game? Why can't he? He's there. He's there. He could, like, when he leaves here, he's a Premier League level player. I don't think Reece Nelson is a top 4 level player, but he's definitely a Premier League level player. You're telling me that he couldn't play a fucking game? 20 minutes at the end of a game? 30 minutes? It's nonsense to me that we have players continuously playing like he plays them to the bone, but doesn't even attempt to try other things to give him some extra resources. But that's just me. Keep playing him to the bone, man. Keep playing him to the bone and see what happens. Because Ben White is a player that we need, and I'm not going to just decide that I think that the player that was there last season is not the player still. I know that that's what a lot of fans do. Their first thing is to pretend as though they've never played well for us before and, oh, he was always shit. Ben White was not. Ben White has been very, very consistent for us and has played a lot of football without any rest. He played the season prior before he started playing right back at center back for us with no break. And then Arteta switched him to a position that's more physically exhausting. And I think Ben White played almost the entire season last season without any breaks. And so he's broken down now and he's still playing. What are we doing? And then now I have people in my face talking about Ben White's no good. Have a seat. Like he is. He is a good player. No, do I still feel like we can upgrade on Ben White? Absolutely. But this idea that he's just a shit player, I feel like is very disingenuous and recency bias, let's see. $20. That's crazy, Moses. What the heck? That's such a nice super chat. I really appreciate it. If you guys don't know, these super chats go to my coffee addiction. So thank you so much. I will be heading to the nearest coffee shop and using this. So I really appreciate you putting this out here for me. It's really sweet. And I really appreciate it. Oh, I see some other super chats here. I'll read them out all right now too. But Moses says, Happy New Year, Gooners. I think Kai needs to play left back with Zinni as a number 8 until we get Timber. Hopefully a striker is bought in Jan, but in offense, we need to mix up the front 3 and Saka and Martinelli taking turns at false 9. I think that's our best use of the front 3 is them switching positions and being more fluid. In terms of playing Kai left back with Zinni as a number 8, I would love for us to just buy a defender if that's the case. Havertz is not a left back, and if you hate him at left center mid, I think you'll hate him there as well. But Zinchenko has never been played as a number 8 under Mikel Arteta, and if I know Mikel Arteta well, once he decides something about your position and the way that you're going to play, you never switch. So I don't think Zinchenko will ever play 8 for us, just like I think Emile Smith-Rowe will never play left center mid again, and I think Martinelli is also never going to play 9. Not because they can't play those positions, but because Arteta has decided that they can't play those positions. But in terms of a striker, It'd be nice to be able to bring one in, but I don't think we'll have the money. But it would be nice if Arsenal could be a little bit creative and maybe just bring in a attacker. I just think Arsenal needs some fresh blood. They need some fresh blood. They need somebody that's hungry. They need a player that's going to allow for some active rotation. And right now, Arteta doesn't trust anybody but the three and Nketiah. And Nketiah being the first man up for me is a crime against humanity. Like, I'm so sorry, but he's just not good enough. He's just not good enough. And him being the first guy up all the time, above Trossard, above ESR, above Reece Nelson, for me just stinks. And quite frankly, if I was those players and I saw a player that was very average playing over me, it would it would demoralize me. It would. So at some point Arteta needs to pick talent over running around and training properly, because you need to find that balance. You really do. And I have a hard time believing that Trossard and Emil and Reece just walk around at training. They may not be the best trainers, but sometimes you just need to pick the better player. And I would play Emil Smith Rowe over Eddie, meaning the times that Eddie has started at the center, in the center, and he's moved Jesus out wide and things like that. To me, that's a nonsense. It really is. Play Jesus through the middle and play Emil, play Reece, play the players that actually play in attacking positions that give you a little bit of creativity. And Nketiah hasn't scored since Sheffield, in the league. He scored in that dead rubber, but he's just not a player that's going to give you consistent goals. And he takes away so much of your creativity and fluidity that he would be the last person that I would choose. But he chooses him anyway. And I don't really get it. I really don't. Seth, thank you so much for your super chat. Says Arteta out if you don't win any major honors this season. I definitely think it's a conversation that should not be off the table anymore. And I've said this many times, that just because you have questions around the manager doesn't necessarily mean you're Arteta outright that second. But I also am not the type of person that feels like we should waste these good players on a manager that may not be the guy. I think sometimes it's good to be proactive rather than reactive. And I'd rather not lose Saliba and Saka and Odegaard and these guys, Martinelli, trying to make something work with a manager that just may not be the guy. They may believe that he is, but it would be a once in a million, or a 1 in a million chance that Arteta is a generational manager that could beat Pep or Klopp to a title. 1 in a million chance. 1 in a million chance. And so what are the chances of it being Arteta? It's very slim. And so Arsenal need to be a little bit more open to the idea that maybe he's not. That doesn't mean the project has to end and we have to start over. But we have some really talented players that I'm not willing, I really would not be willing to lose this good foundation, the best team that we've had in years, off of the back of trying to make Project Arteta work, And I feel I say that with chess too. Like, I don't feel like it's toxic. I don't feel like it's negative. I just feel like, that's just how I'm feeling right now. And he's this whole idea of like he's the only reason why we're talking about a title. I do think if you're allowed ample opportunity without feeling like your job is in jeopardy and you're given 700 million to spend or 600 million to spend, a lot of managers could have gotten us into a title race. I don't think Arteta is the only one that could have gotten us into the title race. So I think people have to take that into consideration when they say things like Arteta is the only reason why we're talking about a title right now. I think most decent managers could do that. Like, most managers just don't get 4 years. They get 1 or 2 years and they're gone. And really, if Arsenal operated like other teams, which I'm not saying that they have to or they should, but if they operated like other teams, Arteta would have been gone in December of like 2020. You know what I mean? And so the fact that he's gotten more time and more resources, I don't necessarily feel like that should be disregarded, because most managers that get more time and more money can do better, And so those are my feelings on Arteta right this second. If he does not win anything, that conversation cannot be off the table, because new players have signed new deals with the expectation of Arsenal winning things. And some of the decisions that Arteta has made, I do think will end up costing us the ability to win the title. And that cannot be overlooked, as we give him a lot of credit for doing what he's done. There also has to be consequences, I feel like, for making wrong decisions, and I feel like there's some glaring ones out there. But thank you so much for your super chat. I really appreciate it. Let's see. Jules, thank you so much for your super chat. Says, I do not trust Arteta with transfers or his man management. Xabi Alonso would do more with this squad. I'm not sure about Xabi Alonso. Um, I think he's fantastic. Don't get me wrong. I think he's fantastic, and what he's doing with Bayer Leverkusen is amazing. But so I don't want to say like 100%. I feel like he would, but I do think there is a manager out there that could just get just 5-10% more out of the group that we have. Um, and I feel like that's all it would take to be where we are now versus where we could be. I don't think Arteta is far off. I don't think he's such a bad manager. I think he's really good, but it's fine margins. The difference between winning the title is having Klopp or Pep as your manager or having, Poch or Ange or Arteta being your manager. Those are, it's fine margins, I think. Having a really good coach and having like a world-class manager. Do you know what I mean? And so somebody could just give you 10%. Like I always say that I wish I could see what Klopp would do with this team, even for a week. Shit, I would like to see what Arsene would do with the team because I feel like it would be set up differently. I feel like different players would get more chances. I feel like some things would be more simplified, so the margins are fine. And I don't necessarily feel like this means that Arteta is a terrible manager. I just feel like we might need a world-class manager to do it because only world-class managers have been able to beat Pep to the title. That's the truth. Only world-class managers have been able to do it. And so if Arteta is not a world-class manager, what are the chances of him doing it? Especially with a team that's probably not as good as Manchester City's or Liverpool's. You know what I mean? I think their teams are superior to ours. So yeah, that's my thing. UK Arsenal says Arsenal are suffering from fans like you and who don't hold the club and manager accountable. I feel like I am holding them accountable. I literally just said that. I don't even need to spell it out. I feel like that's a blanket statement based on the fact that I'm not raging into the camera saying Arteta out and F this and F that and the players are shit and blah blah blah. And for all the people that are holding up the standards, you probably need to go out and start. It's really easy to be Arteta out and be really mad about it and sit in your living room and yell about it. You got to put some action to it. And so just yelling at me about me not holding up the standards, what are you doing to hold up the standards beyond yelling at me? I feel like I'm a pretty balanced person. So if you think I'm a toxic positive, then you can think I'm a toxic positive. I really don't care. Because anybody that really watches the channel knows I'm not. And but you're not doing anything by sitting here yelling at me either. So you're not like, what are you doing beyond yelling at me? Nothing. Yo-Yo says Arteta has been trying his best to fake it until he made it. I knew from day one, currently sandwiched between Unai and Ange, nowhere to hide, with Klopp pushing for the Prem after his worst season. The Arsenal perspective says at least he would give the youth a chance. I just wonder what somebody else would do. KMF says Martinelli has poor dribbling ability and footballing IQ. If you want to win trophies for at least a 5-year period, he is a squad player at best. Fofana and Tony would strengthen us. I mean, I don't know. I feel a little bit like the things that people are saying about Martinelli is disingenuous as well. It's mostly based on his poor form right now. Like Klopp said, he's the talent of the century. And again, I feel like as much as we talk about Odegaard and Saka and Martinelli being these really bad players and they're not really that good and whatever, Saka goes to Man City, you guys would be crying. Odegaard goes somewhere else, you'd be crying. Martinelli goes to Liverpool and smashes it, you'd be crying. I think these players at 22, 25, 20, 21 years old, I think deserve a little bit more leeway than what people are giving them. I don't think you cannot win the title with Martinelli. I don't think Martinelli is that bad of a player. I think he needs to be put in better positions and he needs to focus on his finishing and things like that. But we've seen loads of low IQ players win fucking leagues. Let's be freaking for real. How many, who has a team full of brains and you see what I'm saying? We've seen some low IQ players win titles. Do you know what I mean? So let's be serious. Martinelli is not holding us back from winning the title. I think we have bigger problems than Martinelli being a starter at Arsenal. His lack of form right now is a big issue, but Martinelli to me is well down the list of, oh my God, if we don't replace this guy, we are not going to win. It's not Martinelli, you guys. He's in poor form, but the way we flip-flop on players for me is too drastic. It's too drastic, You can have a low IQ player and they win the league. You can win the league with a low IQ player. You think Luis Suarez is fucking smart? He's won shit before. He ain't smart. Like I could name some invincibles that weren't that damn smart, but they were good at what they did. Come on, you don't have to have like the highest IQ to win a league or to be important to your team. You need more brains around you, but I'm not really listening to the Martinelli nonsense. Like I think speak in the current terms, what we tend to do is make very big statements about players when they're in poor form or not playing well, about how they need to be replaced, how they're shit, how I always knew they were crap. And then when they start playing well again, you have your pants down and you look dumb. So that's not for me. That's not for me. Chosen One says Martinelli does not have low footballing IQ. He's just raw. The Arsenal perspective says we don't need a team full of brainiacs. We need coaching and the right deployment of the players on the pitch. Oh, and to deal with the confidence across the board. That's how I feel too. I think it's more about the coaching than anything else. Martinelli may need a different type of coach. Arteta just may not be the right coach for him. I also worry for Martinelli because he's not an Arteta signing, and Arteta's like non-Arteta signings don't tend to last long and don't tend to um, be favored in the team for very long. I think it's very like Arteta wanting to buy another left wing for a while now and be willing to buy Mudryk of all people who, again, we're not talking about a very smart player. I think speaks a little bit to Arteta how he feels about Martinelli. But I think Martinelli goes to Liverpool and absolutely fucking smashes it. I think he plays well in a team that creates loads of chances and only cares about scoring and has dynamic forwards and doesn't need to tiki-taka their way into everything. He needs space to run in behind. He needs to be able to make those runs. And I just feel like we're being a little short-sighted with Martinelli. I really do. Some of the nonsense that I'm hearing is exactly what I expect from Arsenal fans because we flip-flop on players just like they're doing with Rice right now. Rice was their fucking savior a couple of days ago. Now he's the biggest problem. Like it's so boring. It really is. Boy says Martinelli doesn't have low creativity. He's more of a flair player than a creative like Odegaard. I just think Martinelli needs to focus and then also maybe he does need to be more central, more or not even more central per se, but I think his job needs to be simplified into just scoring goals. And that's why I was saying against Fulham that I wouldn't have minded him starting through the middle and Jesus on the left and they could swap positions because Martinelli needs his job simplified a little bit more. I think he has too many things to think of and the players around him maybe aren't making it as easy for him and he's not finding as much space. So there are some parts of the system that are hindering Martinelli. There's some parts of Martinelli that are hindering him as well. But the idea that Martinelli is not a fantastic player for me is just turns me off so much. It's weird. I think it's weird. Yo-Yo says under a different manager, Martinelli would have been coached to be a 9. We all want, and Sacco would have been coached into an 8. We all want him. Fair enough. Issa says Martinelli to Klopp and LFC would be dangerous. It would be. I don't know why people are talking like Martinelli like he's not a good player. It's weird. It's just he's in a bad run of form. Here to There says the crazy thing is Arteta demands a high level of defensive work rate and unselfishness from Martinelli that is unparalleled and unmatched. People should appreciate him much more. I wonder if it would be if there needs to be a little bit of a hierarchy in the team. And what I would say is that like what I'm trying to say is that of course I want Martinelli and Saka to work hard and I want them to be responsible and like go back, but maybe if we had better defensive players, like our fullbacks could hold their own defensively and didn't need as much help from Saka and Martinelli, that they could be almost pampered a little bit more and stay up further and, keep defenders honest a little bit more. I think one of the strengths of Arsenal is that we always get like 11 men behind the ball, but that also doesn't allow for that really quick, like dangerous counterattack. You have to leave some players up. And I wonder if Martinelli and Saka would not only not break down physically as often. In Saka's case, I'm talking about more in terms of like being so fatigued or like, getting these injuries. But if that would allow us to be more dangerous, if we pampered them a little bit more and allowed them to stay up further for longer and didn't require them to play like fullbacks, if our fullbacks were better or we just took the risk, the risk of having Rice should allow you the risk of leaving Martinelli and Saka higher a little bit more. But there's times where like Saka clears the ball like a fullback and there's nobody up there. And I find that to be a little bit frustrating because those are the opportunities that you should take. You should leave a couple men up, and then kick it long and then see if you can hit them on the counter. That's what Liverpool do. They never leave, they never leave the center backs by themselves. There's always somebody open, most likely Salah, to hit the ball long to. They take that risk of, listen, if you don't score, you're only going to get a couple chances. If you don't score, we're going to turn a very good opportunity for you into a super dangerous opportunity for us. And so you either have to take the risk or sit back. And, I think maybe Martinelli and them should be, maybe given a little bit more license to be the pampered attackers that they should be because, they're our best players. Maybe they should be allowed to do a little bit less work, that doesn't mean that they should be like lazy, but you know what I mean? Because I don't think Salah's lazy defensively. I just think that he's allowed to sit up there and kind of be the threat that he's meant to be. Let's see. Yo-Yo says Arteta wants the forwards to hold the width. That's a choice. Other teams use their fullbacks. We've known he's a control freak at his worst and cowardly or risk averse at his best. But you can also do certain things with your midfielders as well. Like Havertz is somebody that I think could be a little bit wider and could offer the overlap. It doesn't always have to be your fullbacks. And we just don't ever offer width from anybody else. And you can do that. Like, I don't even feel like it just has to be the fullback, if that makes sense. Like even Jesus can offer the width sometimes. My main issue is that we're not switching positions and getting near each other as much. So even if you want players to hold the width a little bit more, that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be Martinelli. It could be Jesus. Jesus can swap out there, and his movement tends to be really useful to get Martinelli central. But I hear what you're saying. It is a choice. And I personally, that's how we played last season too. Like last season, Saka and Martinelli did hold the width. Maybe not as drastic as they do this season, but they did still hold the width. The difference is that they had more players to combine with. They got closer together when we were on attacks. And you at least had Jesus vacating the center forward position, leaving it open for them, and also connecting with them in those wide areas to add an extra man. We're not doing any of those things anymore. Jesus, I would love to see his heat map from this season compared to last season because he's not even moving. He's not moving. If you're going to have like a stationary number 9, then you need to go buy a number 9. Jesus his best qualities are outside the box, but he's not even utilizing those at the moment. Not as much as he should. I don't know why that is. Here to There says, agreed, Havertz does have an engine. He should be varying his runs to complement Nelly much more. Even with like Emile Smith-Rowe can do that as well. Like one of his best qualities is making those runs. And so you could have at least one of them out there to help Martinelli or at least instruct Havertz. Like Havertz should not be occupying center positions unless we're crossing it into the box. Like I think he should go wide. He should go wide and allow Martinelli to come central if Jesus is not going to do that. And we did that in preseason where Havertz overlapped Trossard and Trossard came center. We're not doing that anymore. Trossard scored 2 goals against Barcelona. Both of them were on the penalty spot because he was central and Havertz did the overlap. We just don't do it anymore. I don't get what it is this season where we just don't move. He just doesn't move. So yeah, let's see. The Arsenal perspective says Saka and Martinelli are definitely more isolated and being doubled and tripled up on times. And if that's the case, then that means that somebody else is open. But what it feels like is we're willing to occupy their 3 or 4 defenders or whatever and allow them to double up on our players. But we don't make that punish them. And the last thing you really want is for Saka and Martinelli to be barely getting crosses off for players that are suboptimal options. You have to give them players to play around and stuff like that and really punish them. And we just don't do that. It's really weird, but there's things wrong with the system. I agree. But there's also choices that have been made from a signings perspective that I just feel have put us in a position where we don't have any wiggle room for January, but we also don't have enough, and the main signing that stands out to me is Havertz. As good as he's been playing, he just is not an all-weather, all-action guy. And that's really what we needed for 70 million and 200 and something thousand pounds per week. You have to have that other player be somebody that rain or shine, no matter who else is around, can play that position and offer a lot. And I think there's some games where I'll probably look at Havertz and say he's probably not the best option. And you can't attribute resources to a guy that cannot do everything. You know, um, that's my, if we hadn't bought Rice, Havertz would have been our biggest ever signing or Arteta's most expensive signing. And so when you think about it in those terms, to have somebody that offers a very specific skill set that can't be applied in every single game feels like a very strange use of resources. Um, yeah. And that's beyond the mental, like, this side of the game that I just didn't feel like we needed to bring in somebody that was so shy, so quiet, timid. I just don't think we needed to bring in somebody like that when we probably could have argued that that Arsenal team of last season needed more. They needed more experience, more confidence, more attitude. We gave them, they gave them somebody that needed them to bring him up to speed. Like, I just feel like that was very strange to me. Let's see. Social Joint says surely Arteta wasn't going to play the same way in the second half of the season. I mean, I think we were all feeling like we were playing this controlled game to, like, maybe conserve energy or, so that we can crescendo into, our best form or whatever. But he really needs to take this January period, this January 2 weeks, and decide if he wants to shit or get off the pot. You need to give this particular group of players more freedom in the final third and get your better attackers into positions where they'll thrive. You need to take more risks. You need to encourage them to play football and be excited to play football. And right now, our team doesn't look like they're fucking enjoying it. And I wouldn't be enjoying it either if I was being told maybe all the time to not give away the ball or, to be safe or make sure we don't get exposed. Like, Rice is our insurance policy. And we've already seen that we're giving up goals no matter what. Even with a really good defense, we're still giving up goals. We're giving up more goals than we did last season. So sometimes the best defense is attack. So sometimes you have to attack and you have to put yourself in risk. And Arteta seems like maybe he's not willing to take those risks. You're not going to win shit if you don't take risks. We're not good enough defensively to keep them out. You can't concede 0 goals, So I like the idea of being better defensively. And I think we did need to work on our shape a little bit and stuff like that. But ultimately, Arsenal need to score more goals and we need to get our attacking players into better positions and have them enjoy football. They need to, like, Martinelli is nothing but a fun player. Like, he's a flair, fun, attacking player. And he's just been devoid of any of that all season. And that's unfortunate. It really is. But he also definitely needs to do things on his own. But, Arteta's not without any blame, I think. Boysha shouts for Rice as captain is no doubt because he is the temperamental replacement for Xhaka. But that's the thing. It's like we didn't need to replace, we needed to add. We needed to add more of that. Just imagine if we had added someone else with Rice's mentality instead of Kai Havertz's mentality. From minute one, somebody that decided that they wanted Arsenal to win and would do anything to make that happen, we would be in a different place, I think. That's how I feel, we need less shy people and more players with some balls, It's been nice watching Rice do that for us. Not enough players are doing it, Adebayo says, please recall Tierney to replace Zinchenko at left back until Timber returns to April. Well, if you want another player on the sideline, then you definitely want Tierney because he's already missed 9 games for Real Sociedad. I'll be really honest with you guys. Like, there's nothing that makes sense less than bringing Tierney back off of loan. He couldn't stand it. He could not withstand the Premier League when he was here. And he's been injured since he's been gone. And so he's also a player that Arteta is not going to modify his tactics to suit. And so he's useless to us. He's absolutely useless. If he's going to make Kivior invert, I do not want to see Tierney invert. I don't like it. It looks weird. If you're going to bring Tierney back, then you have to be willing to change your tactics to suit somebody who bombs forward and crosses the ball in. He's not going to do that. He hasn't changed any of his tactics to suit different players that don't play in the starting 11. So Tierney doesn't make sense from a tactical standpoint, nor does he make sense from an availability standpoint. Tierney needs to stay where he's at, and hopefully he can play enough games so we can get a fee. Yo-Yo says Xhaka wanted to leave. He did want to leave. That's why when people are like, we should have kept Xhaka, I'm like, why would we have taken Xhaka? Why would we have kept Xhaka? He didn't want to stay. He even said it in an interview he did not want to stay. So it was time for him to go, but we should have replaced him differently. I think the revisionism on Xhaka is really kind of, it's really kind of the thing too, because he had one really good season and all of a sudden he's the player that we just could not like. He's gone up in stature where I wish we would have recruited properly so we could see what it would have been like to have a player that does all the Xhaka things but better, because those players do exist and that's the player that we should have gotten. So 65 million gets you that player this past summer and we didn't do it. And so the Xhaka revisionism for me is a little sickening, but that's what happens. Like when you don't replace properly, people end up romanticizing players that, if we were honest, probably they're not what we imagine. They're not what we're probably making them out to be. Jack is fantastic. He's a very, very good midfielder and he has a lot of really good qualities, but you could have upgraded upon him. You could have, we just didn't do it. Kuvi says Xhaka wanted to stay. In his latest interview, he said Arsenal sold him. You must have read wrong because he definitely said he wanted to leave. I could pull it up for you guys as well. So I don't know what you're talking about. Here to There says Havertz was our very first signing before even Rice. I wonder if Xhaka was dead set on leaving because he knew he was benched to Havertz coming in. You guys, he wanted to leave. I don't think we need to. I mean, you guys can go down the rabbit hole from it, but he literally said in an interview that he wanted to leave, and all Arsenal needed to do, they didn't need to convince him to stay. They just needed to buy a midfielder that had those overall qualities, but better. Xhaka wasn't perfect. And he was somebody that at the end of last season, I think all of us felt like we needed to upgrade upon him more than we needed to upgrade upon Partey, right? And so this revisionism now is, we should have kept him. No, the energy that we should be taking is that we should have spent the money better and we should have gotten a younger, more agile, athletic version of Xhaka that could have taken us to the next level, because Xhaka also had limitations that hurt us in the end. And people don't remember that because all they remember is the football that we played from August until December. They don't remember anything that happened beyond that. I fucking remember we needed to upgrade on Xhaka. He wasn't terrible. He had one good season. He had one really good season. And now that we haven't replaced him properly, people are revising history. Xhaka is a great player, but let's be for real. Let's be for real. Michael says Xhaka is better for Arsenal than Kai any day, anytime. Doesn't really matter. Xhaka's not here, and we needed to use the money better. So even if you do feel like Xhaka was better for Kai, what does that mean for us now? What does that mean? What do we do moving forward? We're gonna end up rebuying in that position in the summer, which really pisses me off, because that 65 million, even if you weren't going to get that left center mid, I would have preferred Arsenal, if they weren't going to get a left center mid at all, to have used Emile Smith-Rowe and Vieira in that position. And I know people don't like Vieira, and I know people don't rate ESR. I don't even think ESR is that amazing. But I just feel like if you were going to buy Havertz, I would have rather just use the players that we had and taken that 65 million and bought a fantastic attacker, somebody with clinical finishing, everything. We could have bought a striker this past summer. We could have. And I don't think Emile Smith-Rowe and Fabio Vieira are any less flawed at left center mid than Kai Havertz is, if I'm honest with you. I think with a run of games, Emile Smith-Rowe and Fabio Vieira could do a similar, maybe not amazing job, if that makes sense. Not something where we didn't feel like we still needed to buy that player. But if you weren't going to buy a left center mid, you should have just bought an attacker. Should have done something else with that money. That's all I'm saying, but we can't do anything about it now. And we're gonna end up buying again in that position, which is frustrating because we could have just done that anyway. Arsenal are talking about, or there's rumors out there about Curtis Jones. There's still huge rumors about Zubamendi. Um, you guys know how I feel about Zubamendi. I would buy him. I would buy him. But because that would allow you to move Declan Rice to the left 8. And no, he's not the most creative or like amazing option for that right at this moment. But if I like, he's probably the best left 8 that we have right now, Declan Rice, if we're honest. If we're honest, Declan Rice is probably our best number 6 and our best number 8, you know? So I would buy Zubamendi. Curtis Jones, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know. It, I don't know. Like, first of all, he's not leaving Anfield. He's not leaving them. Like, he's not leaving them. Especially since he's been playing better recently. I think he'll probably cement a spot and be fine. But if we bought Curtis Jones, I just don't even know what I'd do because again, with the money that you would have to buy him, let's not alleviate our rivals of their problems. Let's stop doing that. Let's go spend that money somewhere else. Go find somebody from another league that can do the shit. Go find somebody from a different team. Stop alleviating our rivals from their own problems. Stop giving our rivals money to play with. I would hate to bring in Curtis Jones mostly just for that reason. It's not that I don't think he's a good player. I don't know, like why. Like I think that's like this, like why if you have money, um, we could just go ahead and buy somebody else that doesn't have any affiliation with our rivals and just move forward. I don't even like everybody that comes to us from a rival ends up having their worst game against, their team, and they never score against their ex team. Like I just don't want it anymore. But Curtis Jones is a good player. He's just not somebody that I feel like takes us to that next level. And I would hate for us to go through another summer and not hit the mark. Like all we need to do is buy a left center mid that takes us to another level. Like find somebody that can do some of the defensive stuff, but gives us more creativity and more going forward than Granit Xhaka did. I know that that's like a tall order, but like we have to get that right this next summer. It's just ridiculous. Buy a striker, buy a left center mid, and stop the bullshit. But knowing Arsenal, they'll try to make it hard again and go out and get Curtis Jones. Like, don't make it hard. It's not hard. It's not hard. Go get somebody. There are plenty of players out there that would have suited this better than Kai Havertz would have. But again, even if you do rebuy it, then you rebuy in that position, then you also have to ask questions about us spending 65 million and 200 and something thousand pounds per week on a squad player. So again, it doesn't make any sense. Like none of it did. Jones Santos says Curtis Jones is a Scouser. I guess that means that he wouldn't come to London, which is fine with me. Michael says Arsenal's problem is that he is predictable because they play more on the right wing than in the middle and the left wing. He should balance the play. King Alex says we should have had backup for Odegaard, Saka, Jesus, Saliba, Xhaka, everything else is not relevant, wasted opportunity. Well, we're still buying. I think we should kind of be in the era of like this next summer should have been about improving the squad beneath the starters. This past summer that we just had, where we bought Kai Havertz and stuff, was about getting that starting 11 to the next level. So we were buying like a defender to replace Zinchenko. We were buying a midfielder to start, and we should have probably bought an attacker or another midfielder, and we didn't do that. So we're going to have to redo that again. And then we're still going to have a squad that's probably not what everybody wants. But that's why I'm a big advocate for keeping the players that we're replacing so that they just become squad players. And that strengthens the squad on its own. I don't really believe in buying squad players. I think players that are already in your team should just kind of fall below. And so, Tomiyasu as a squad player, Zinchenko as a player, like well down the list. Havertz as a squad player, Jesus as a squad player. Even if you buy a winger and you decide they're better than Martinelli, Martinelli as a squad player, if that's what you want to do. But I feel like that's a much better way to build the squad than buying squad players. I think it's really hard to buy them. When you do it, usually doesn't work out. So yeah. Social Join says again, it's not about midfield. Get direct striker that runs in behind, scores, attacks CBs, and the data shows that these are top goal scorers. I mean, if you don't think that the midfield needs any other players, then that's fine. I still think we need at least one more midfielder. We're gonna have to rebuild it anyway. We're losing Jorginho and maybe even Thomas Partey. So the midfield discussion for me is very valid. We need a striker and a midfielder. I don't think it's one or the other. A striker will help us, but I just feel like there's going to be games where if we don't want to invert, which I think we should start to move away from it, and just play like a normal fucking team, that you're going to have a midfielder that does more than what Kai Havertz does on the ball. When you have somebody that can invert like Zinchenko, he relieves Havertz from having to do the build-up role. And so he works a lot better. But when you have days like you had against Fulham, you have to have a midfielder like a Granit Xhaka type that doesn't make it so that Rice is all on his own with the buildup. You need more than one player that can progress the ball. And so, yeah, I still think no matter what, you need a midfielder, but we do need a striker, but we've needed a striker for a long time. Like that's like not new news. I think we always knew at some point we would outgrow Jesus. I didn't know it was going to be this quick, but it's definitely there because he's also giving Lacazette head case, and that's not cute. Okay, you guys, we've been going for 2 hours. We've been going too long. See, when we just start talking, we just start doing whatever now. But there's 200 of you guys in here. Make sure you guys like the video and subscribe to the channel on your way out. This was the first day of 2 streams a day, and I hope you guys really appreciate. You guys really like it and enjoyed it because most of it, most of the regular people, I either saw them in the morning or I saw them now, and so you get an opportunity to see more than one show. Or if you can't catch one, find the other. So that's great. Same thing tomorrow. No changes. Patreon content coming out. Diluted is going to be on the channel on Friday. So make sure you guys notifications and all that kind of stuff is on. Working on the surprise that I have that's going to be dropping around January 15th. So again, make sure you guys have notifications on. And I'll see you guys tomorrow at 1 p.m. UK time, 5 a.m. my time. Be there or don't and watch it later and then come join me at 9 p.m. See you guys later. Bye, guys.